Imagine living in the shadows, harboring a secret that could mean your immediate execution. You are the last lingering remnant of a fallen dynasty, a living ghost of a regime that was overthrown. In the ancient world, to be born into the bloodline of a deposed king was practically a death sentence. New rulers did not leave loose ends, they purged them. Yet, hidden away in a desolate town, there lived a man who carried this dangerous royal blood in his veins, along with a permanent physical brokenness, a daily reminder of the terrifying day his family lost everything. His name was Mephibosheth, and his encounter with the most powerful king in Israel's history defies every expectation of ancient power, vengeance, and royal protocol. To fully understand the weight of Mephibosheth's story, we must look at the brutal political landscape of the ancient Near East. When a new king ascended to the throne, the standard practice was to eradicate the family of the previous king to prevent any future rebellions or claims to the crown. For years, Israel was ruled by King Saul, a man who descended into paranoia and spent a vast amount of his reign hunting down David, a young warrior who had been anointed by God to succeed him. Yet, despite Saul's relentless hostility, David shared a profound, unbreakable bond of friendship with Saul's son, Jonathan. As we find recorded in the first book of Samuel, chapter 20, verses 14 and 15, Jonathan made David swear a solemn oath, asking him to show him the Lord's own kindness as long as he lived, and to never stop showing kindness to his family, even when the Lord had destroyed all of David's enemies from the face of the earth. This promise hung in the balance when tragedy struck on Mount Gilboa. King Saul and his son Jonathan were killed in a devastating battle against the Philistines. The house of Saul collapsed, and David eventually ascended to the throne, unifying the kingdom. By all earthly logic, the house of Saul was finished, and any surviving members were enemies of the state. The tragedy of the royal family shattered the life of one small boy. According to the second book of Samuel, chapter 4, verse 4, Jonathan had a son named Mephibosheth, who was crippled in both feet. The scripture tells us that he was 5 years old when the news of the death of Saul and Jonathan came from the town of Jezreel. In a sheer panic to flee before the Philistines or David's forces could arrive, her nurse picked him up and ran. But in her desperate haste, she dropped the child, and he became permanently crippled. In a single day, Mephibosheth lost his father, his grandfather, his royal inheritance, and his physical mobility. For his own safety, he was taken into hiding. He ended up in a place called Lo-Debar, sheltered in the home of a man named Machir. The name Lo-Debar translates roughly to a place of nothingness or no pasture. It was a barren, forgotten place, a fitting refuge for a forgotten prince living in constant fear of discovery. Years passed. David consolidated his power, established his capital in Jerusalem, and defeated his surrounding enemies. The kingdom was secure. Yet amidst the comfort of his palace, the king remembered an old oath. As we read in the second book of Samuel, chapter 9, verse 1, David asked his court, "Is there anyone left of Saul's family? If there is, I would like to show him kindness for Jonathan's sake." A former servant of Saul's household named Ziba was brought before the king. In verse 3 of that same chapter, Ziba informed David that there was still one son of Jonathan alive, but that he was crippled in both feet. The scripture tells us that he was living in the desolate town of Lo-Debar. When David learned that the man was living in the desolate town of Lo-Debar, he immediately sent messengers to bring him to the palace. Consider the terror Mephibosheth must have felt when the king's royal guard arrived at Lo-Debar. The moment he had dreaded his entire life had finally come. The king had found him. He was brought to Jerusalem, surely expecting the swift and brutal justice typical of ancient monarchs. We are told in the second book of Samuel, chapter 9, verse 6, that when Mephibosheth arrived before the king, he bowed down to the ground in deep respect. He was waiting for the executioner's sword. But then the king spoke his name, Mephibosheth. David's next words changed the course of history. According to verse 7, David said to him, "Don't be afraid. I will be kind to you for the sake of your father Jonathan. I will give you back all the land that belonged to your grandfather Saul, and you will always be a guest at my table." Mephibosheth was utterly overwhelmed. He bowed again. As recorded in verse 8, he asked the king, "What is your servant that you should notice a dead dog like me?" In the ancient world, calling oneself a dead dog was the ultimate expression of worthlessness and humiliation. He saw himself as broken, destitute, and unworthy. Yet David did not see a threat, nor did he see a dead dog. He saw the son of his dearest friend. David restored an immense fortune to Mephibosheth and commanded Ziba and his family to farm the land for him. But the greatest honor was the most intimate one. As the closing verses of chapter 9 tell us, Mephibosheth, the crippled outcast, ate at King David's table, just like one of King David's own sons, for the rest of his life. The story of David and Mephibosheth is not just an ancient historical footnote. It is a marvelous illustration of what the Hebrew scriptures call Hesed, a word that encompasses loyal love, enduring kindness, and covenant faithfulness. From this narrative, we can draw two profound insights. The first lesson is the supreme value of honoring our commitments. David was at the height of his power. Jonathan was gone, and there was no political advantage to seeking out Saul's descendants. In fact, it was a political risk. Yet David chose integrity over convenience. He actively pursued an opportunity to show kindness simply to honor a promise made years before. In our modern age, where commitments are frequently discarded when they become inconvenient, David's active pursuit of his oath challenges us to remain faithful to our word, even when the other party can offer us nothing in return. The second lesson is a beautiful reflection on the nature of grace, receiving unmerited favor. Mephibosheth had nothing to offer the king. He was broken by a fall he did not cause, stripped of his inheritance, and living in a place of nothingness. He anticipated judgment, but he received an invitation. He was given a seat at the royal table, not because of his own perfection or worthiness, but because of a covenant made before he was even born. In many ways, this historical event mirrors the spiritual journey of humanity. We often find ourselves spiritually crippled, hiding in our own personal Lo-Debar, feeling utterly unworthy of divine love. Yet the story of Mephibosheth reminds us that grace is not about our perfection, it is about the king's kindness. No matter how broken we feel, or how long we have been hiding in the shadows, there is an invitation waiting. A seat has been prepared for us at the king's table.